What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Frankie D'Astoli Show. I am your host, Frankie D'Astoli. I am here with two of the greatest people that I know, Rob Fink and Jake Culleny. Not only are they great because they're phenomenal real estate investors with a ton of knowledge, but they're great because they always offer a helping hand. And when you are in a real estate investor, your community, your networking, all of that is super, super important to move into real estate, to move on to the next level. And I couldn't be more excited to have them on. They both are a partnership, which we're going to talk a lot about partnership, but they started off individually, and I'll kind of break some of their attributes down. Jake started real estate investing in 2020. He flipped a couple houses. He owns a couple of rental properties, and he manages and owns an Airbnb in Vermont, which he goes down there quite frequently for skiing. And Rob, on the other hand, has been an investor since 2019. He has a very, very diverse background. He owns and operates a general contracting business. He's flipped about 40 homes. He owns approximately 30 rentals. I think he's losing count at this point. And another cool thing is he owns and operates a laundromat and an Airbnb. So these are guys that come with a ton of diversity to the table, and they've recently broken into an extremely new realm of really, really focusing on ground up development, which we're going to be talking a lot as they establish their new partnership together, community developers. But I couldn't be more excited to have Jake and Rob on the show. Fellas, how you guys doing?
Pretty good, Frankie.
Doing awesome, man.
Thanks for having us, man. Really awesome to see how far the podcast has come and seeing how far you've grown, and just glad to be here.
For sure. I appreciate that. Thank you, guys. And I'll give you guys kind of a quick backstory. When I was leaving my W-2 job, and I talk a lot about this on the podcast of just kind of like your vision, your transition, your action, your faith, those 4 steps. Jake and Rob were a huge part of my transition plan as I kind of came into working with them on some stuff as we kind of as I left my W-2 job, bringing some deals to them. I know we closed an awesome 5-unit in Browns Mills. We've done some stuff in Atlantic City too. So it's been really, really awesome. And on top of that, I got just a great mentor out of Rob and a really great friend and helper in Jake as well. So it's been awesome. Again, like I said, I'm very excited to have you guys on. Let's just start a little bit with I gave kind of a quick background on both you guys, but I just want to kind of talk about your guys' background in general, because it is even way more extensive than I went into. So whoever wants to start off, you want to just give everybody a little background on yourselves.
Go ahead and get started.
All right, I'll get started. No pressure. So I went to school for engineering. I graduated in 2018 from Rowan, and kind of went into the corporate path. Real estate never even really crossed my mind. I worked for Lockheed Martin in Morristown for about 4 years. And during that time, in 2019, about a year after I graduated, I bought my first single family home. And it was like, I went through such like a realm of like, first I was looking at condos, and I was looking at flips. And then I looked at every house possible. My realtor probably hated me. And I kept coming back to this house in Marlton where I ended up landing. And it was just like, it's a small rancher, and it was a dump. Like, these people just let the house go. I mean, there was dog pee everywhere. It was just it was real bad shape. But I loved the area, and I just kind of figured, hey, my dad knows how to do a lot of stuff, and we bought it, and we ended up basically like living. We didn't move in for about 2 months, but we basically flipped the house, and we went through just renovating every space, and I just learned a ton through that, and a lot of sweat and tears went into it, but we ended up landing in a house that we made the way that we wanted, and it was a huge eye-opening experience. That kind of got me into real estate, and then the motivation to keep going was just working at Lockheed. COVID hit, and the corporate world went super sour. Everyone just became like really jaded, and it just was not a good environment. And I'm sitting in like a cubicle with no windows, fluorescent lights, and it was a terrible experience. So started looking out for, resources on, what I could do to change that. And of course, like many others, landed on Bigger Pockets, and just started soaking in as much as I could. And I had a good friend of mine that worked with me at the time, Christian. We started talking about it. He was a few years older than me, and he was sort of in the same headspace of the job's great, but this really isn't what I'm looking to do long term. And so we both got into the podcast together, both started talking about it, and we bought a rental property in Collingswood in March of 2020. COVID hit on, I believe my birthday is March 12th, and COVID hit on March 13th. That's when crap hit the fan, and we closed on our rental property on that day. So it was sort of like, oh my God, what did we just do? The world's shutting down. But we bought the property. We ended up doing some light rehab. We both put some sweat equity into it, and we got the property rented, I believe, in May. And it really just took off from there. We were paying our principal, interest, tax, insurance was $1,300, and we were making $2,500 with those first tenants. So like right off the bat, we were making a ton of raw cash flow. Yeah. And so that sort of started. We bought a duplex about a year later, and then we bought a townhome in Mount Laurel. And so that was sort of like what started the rental, real estate, and passive income goal. So for me, with my W-2 job, at the same time, around 2020, I got my real estate license. I thought it'd be a good idea. I thought it'd be a good synergy for showing houses and, not having to depend on an agent. So I got licensed, and I met a piece of advice I learned on the podcast was reach out to your local property managers. They, have good contacts. They know contractors. They know agents. And so I met the broker of Sherway Property Management, Marlton, Mike Williams, and he had gone to Rowan, years before me, and we had that common connection. We met, and he's like, "Yeah, bro, why don't you hang your license here, and just can send you some business here and there." And so, when COVID hit, we were managing about, I think, 600 properties at that time, and a lot of our owners wanted to sell. So Mike, they're a property management company, and Mike, was handling some of the sales, but he's like, "Hey, Jake, you got your license. I know you're working at Lockheed, but you want to do some of these sales." So I was doing some really rough stuff. I was doing tenant occupied sales, and, didn't love it, but I saw the income grow, and just more and more sales kind of came in, and it was sort of like a pathway for me to quit my job. At the time, the group that I was working in at Lockheed, the program sort of shut down. So they were going to shuffle me on to some other, program within the corporation. And I just really wasn't for that. So I ended up going part-time for about 6 months. And I think that was in January of 2022. So I was part-time at Lockheed, part-time, doing realtor stuff, working with Sherway, and, just selling houses. And that really took off in that year. And so in June of 2022, I was able to quit my job and do that full-time. And then kind of to shuffle gears and how, Rob and I ended up working together is another piece of advice I heard on the podcast was, try and find a mentor. Don't just go out there and be like, "Hey, teach me things, teach me everything." It was more like, go out there and, how can I add value? How can I, work with somebody and be like be a good blend of a good relationship. And at the time I had a property in Voorhees that I was looking to buy. It was through a family friend connection. And it was a huge single family in Voorhees, and way above anything I had done. And I met Rob at one of our local meetups. I saw what he was doing with his flipping business, and I was like, "Hey, maybe this would be a good partnership." We walked the property together and just kind of talked a lot, and that property didn't work out, but I sort of like planted the seed of, "Hey, here's where I'm at." I was still at Lockheed at the time, but I said, "I got an engineering background. I've done a couple flips, if anything I can do in your business or help, like, I'd love to learn." And sort of like grew from there. And you reached out a couple months later. He was about to have his first daughter, Alana, and just sort of took off from there, and here we are today. But that's sort of like my backstory. I don't want to go too deep into that.
No, that's great. I think, and Rob, we're gonna get to you in a second too. And I don't want to jump the gun because we're gonna definitely talk about mentorship. We're gonna talk about partnership. But I think, Jake said a bunch of things that really stood out there. But one thing is, there's this overall growth through real estate. It doesn't happen overnight. It was kind of like you fell into one property and, wow, just as you bought that property, things started going crazy, but you battled through the craziness of COVID and what the uncertainty is there. And you start moving on and you meet other people and you meet other connections. And, some of these relationships that you meet in real estate, they're not always long lasting, but they're fruitful for what they are, and they help you on that growth path. And I think you've seen that to this point where you get to Rob and you approach him not so much from a perspective of, "Hey, I'm looking for a mentor, just teach me everything you know," but, "Hey, how could I serve you?" Right? You're seeking to serve at that point. And in regard to that, you're bringing value to Rob. And again, we're going to get all into that mentorship and partnership, but great backstory, Jake. I appreciate it. Rob, take it away, baby.
Yeah. So I would say the seeds of my real estate journey kind of started in college. So in college, my friends and we kind of had like a summer job where we were canvassing, so door knocking in different neighborhoods for a handyman franchise. So we were going around knocking doors, asking people if they're looking to do any sort of like renovations or anything like that. So we would collect people's information, put it on a form, bring it back to like our office, and then get paid for every lead that we generated. So that was like right around 2009, 2010. So it was definitely like a rough time for a lot of people economically. And that, that's kind of like that was one of the ways we were generating leads. So we worked for that company for a little bit. Then my friend Nick and I said, "Hey, why don't we kind of start our own? We kind of know how the leads are generated. It sounds like that's one of the hardest parts of the construction business.
Yeah.
It's not, it's part of it, but it's definitely not the hardest part or the only part. So we decided to start our own kind of like franchise style handyman company. So we started that while we were in college. We grew it over a couple of years. It was doing a decent amount of revenue. I ended up graduating college in 2012 and kind of had a decision as to which route I'm going to go. Am I going to kind of continue pursuing this, or am I going to get a job? I went to a college where entrepreneurship was like not a thing that was talked about. Like nobody really did it. Nobody knew like what it was. So when I told people like, hey, I'm going back to like my dorm room and I'm like, emailing like customers about like, problems that we caused in their house with their kitchen renovation, because we didn't know what we were doing. It was kind of a weird thing. So
That's great.
Our model was that we would sub everything out. So my partner and I, we were not involved in, construction like whatsoever. And the crazy thing looking back at it now is that we weren't even physically there, like for the business at all. We weren't overseeing our projects, like literally nothing. We were just like completely hands off from like everything. So going back to graduating college, I had this decision kind of, do I want to get a full-time job? Do I want to pursue entrepreneurship? I applied a few different places. I actually had a job offer from Morgan Stanley and then another place that I ended up deciding to turn down. And I'm glad that I did, and kind of just decided to go the other direction of entrepreneurship. So the year after that, we ended up listing our company for sale on Biz Buy Sell. And then we had a few different inquiries. We ended up selling it to one of the people that inquired. And that was a super interesting experience, selling the company.
How old were you at that time?
23, I think. Yeah,
23 years old. You sold your first company. That's amazing.
Yeah. So we did that. And then after that, it's like kind of, what do you do now? So we sold the company. We got a good bit of the cash up front from it. And so what I decided to do was to use that cash as essentially like not to buy an entire house, but to put money into a project. So bought my first property in Philadelphia in kind of like a rough neighborhood that I was definitely like enthusiastic about in 2013. And that was a 6-bedroom, 3,000 square foot house in like kind of a bad neighborhood. So that was definitely like kind of like an intense first project, had a lot of problems all by itself.
Go all in.
We hired, it was just me, like, managing everything, but I hired people like basically like off the street, like pretty much to go and do demo, and like people, were causing problems and stuff. And so that was a pretty interesting experience, but I got through it and, basically ended up fully gutting this entire house. I didn't know at first that I'd have to fully gut it. Fully gutted the entire house. So I kind of got to see the whole process of wiring, all new plumbing, all new wiring, everything, essentially like new construction just from like the walls in. So got that done. And that was kind of like an intense experience. So I ended up taking a little bit of time off from real estate after that, trying to figure out kind of what I want to do next. And I had another business opportunity come my way for a wedding videography company, which is an industry I was never involved in, but somebody I knew was looking to get out of their business. So ended up taking it over, rebranding everything, kind of taking the existing processes, bringing on a different partner to help me out with it. And then we ran that from 2014, 15 up till now, actually. So I've been running that business since then. And then to continue and pick back up on the real estate part, and Jake talks a bit about Bigger Pockets, and that was actually a huge inspiration for me as well. So fast forward to like 2017, 2018, I discovered the Bigger Pockets podcast, and I was just like, like infatuated with it. I would listen to like multiple episodes a day, like 7 days a week, just when I'm driving, when I'm working out, when I'm at home, just listening to episode after episode, like picking up as much information as I can. And I kind of determined at that point, like I like the flip that I did. Like, I mean, looking back, it was a good experience, but I really want to get involved with rentals. So from that point forward, my main priority was really to acquire as many long-term cash flowing assets as possible while still having active income with my other business, and then potentially flipping as well. So I'm kind of continued on that path from like 2019 up till, or 2018, 2019 up until like 2022. And at that point, ended up sometime around there, ended up joining our local real estate group, which has been huge. That's where I met Jake. So ended up having a event at a house that I was flipping, kind of like a walkthrough met Jake there. And then Jake kind of mentioned that we continued talking. He kind of brought an opportunity, which was awesome. And just after I met him, I'm kind of like, how can we figure out a way to work together?
Yeah.
And, ultimately led to the partnership that we have now. So.
That's fire. I mean, like, there's just so much that I would like to dive into in regards to buying a business also. Like one question, and then I know we got to segue because there's so much that we want to talk about, but what'd you go to school for, Rob?
So I graduated with a degree in finance.
Okay. And Jake, you were an engineer, right?
Yeah, electrical engineering.
So because I graduated with a degree in finance too, but maybe I'm just way behind a guy like you, Rob, but at 23 years old, I'm not, selling businesses and buying businesses. What do you attribute to kind of being a young entrepreneur that just has kind of that foresight to do those types of things and to make those types of moves?
To be honest, it's not really foresight. It's just having an idea and then saying, let's figure out a way to do it.
Yeah.
And just straight up, figuring it out with no other direction other than research and grit.
Yeah, Rob's personality is just figure out how to do it, where mine is I can really get stuck in the analysis paralysis. All right, well, we got to know every single facet to this before we can venture into it. I remember when I met Rob, and at the time he was he's doing a ton of flips, he's doing new construction. I'm like, Rob, how long have you been a contractor, man? You must know how to do all this stuff. He's like, dude, I can barely swing a hammer. I don't know how to do it. I've learned, I've talked to people, I've watched videos, and I understand it, and I know how to delegate it. And it was just it was just such a mind blowing thing when we first started working together.
And so. I think that actually is a good, I think it shows why you guys actually make a good partnership, because Rob is very much get it, go, and make it happen. And Jake, you're more analytical. And I think when you think about partnerships, at least in my own partnership, my partner Steve too, we offset each other in a lot of ways. And that's actually very beneficial. And even when I think about my marriage and my wife, Christine is extremely introverted. I am obviously an extroverted person. And it's kind of these opposites attract in this way. So let's talk about your guys' partnership. So obviously we've kind of come to this point where you guys introduced each other at one of these houses that Rob was flipping, and you found a way to work together. How did that partnership kind of come about? How did it start, and where is it today?
Well, the partnership itself, I've been working with Rob since, I guess, around April of 2022.
Yep.
It was a few months after we met at that property, and again, that property didn't work out. But I think the idea of, hey, maybe there's somebody, maybe for Rob, hey, there's somebody I can work with, and you had reached out a few months later. And I think the main motivation for you was, your daughter was on the way, and you knew that was going to be a huge, time commitment and family commitment, and managing all this stuff yourself wasn't really necessarily feasible or healthy. So, reached out and sort of worked for you for about 2 years as sort of your project manager and managing most of your rehabs. And not, I wasn't doing that with the expectation that, okay, a partnership's going to come, but sort of just did what was asked. And my time was still split with Sherway at the time. So it wasn't like I was full time with you, but I did as much as I could. And I think that's sort of we both saw the value in each other, and started kind of talking about partnership. We were, we have very similar interests when it comes to new construction and development. And we work well together, where we just both bring different things to the table. So I think that was sort of the birth of the partnership. We had a lot of stuff to figure out because Rob had been doing it for a while, and he had, his LLC set up, and he had pretty much on the real estate side had been doing it by himself up until that point. You never really had a partner in real estate. So there was definitely, and we're still to this day figuring that out. But I think, the partnership was birthed out of that. And I guess officially it's been since about the fall of 2024 since,
November,
officially. But, we started Community Developers, which really the focus for us is to do ground up new construction. And, we're doing that. And, that's kind of where I see
it too. Honestly, you guys are doing it aggressively.
Yeah. So, basically kind of when Jake, when we first started working together, kind of like you mentioned, we were having our daughter, and I kind of had no idea what that's going to look like as a first time parent. You just don't know. So I'm kind of what is my time? What does my day look like now? How much am I doing? And is it realistic for me to kind of continue doing that? So kind of ran into Jake at the perfect time, where he had some time to help manage projects. He had some experience doing stuff like that before. And for both of us, it was definitely a learning experience. I think for me, bringing someone else in and, was a whole kind of different experience. I'd hired people on the construction side and stuff before, but never somebody more on project management, like administrative kind of side. So that was definitely a new experience for me. And then for Jake, he got to, definitely a lot of the projects that we did were projects I've never done before, and also projects he hasn't done before, like, very heavy fire damage rehab and stuff like that. So we both really learned a lot over the last couple of years. And one thing that's interesting is kind of as you work together with somebody, you may not know at first, like the reasons why you may want to eventually partner with them later. But as you kind of work together, you may see like, oh, it actually, like, I didn't know this about this person. And maybe you don't know something about yourself. So like one thing that Jake really has helped me out with, especially is like different like work habits. So like I always, work for myself. So I didn't really see like how you're supposed to like organize things and how like, you're supposed to organize email and just like dumb stuff that like if I had fixed like 10 years ago, I would probably have been like way further than I am today. So, so I guess what I'm saying is in these mentor relationships, I think the mentor-mentee, a lot of times the mentor learns just as much as the mentee does, just in like a different way, which is really cool. And I've definitely seen that over time.
Yeah. And I mean, even personally, I mean, Jake is probably one of the most organized people that I've ever met, and he's helped me out with a lot of stuff in regards to that too. And I know that your guys' business is now looked, even just in the time of kind of like this past like 8 months that I've really been kind of closer with you guys. I've seen just so much development in regards to like what it looks like too, which is really awesome. Yeah, I mean, so going from partnering on these flips and rentals in regards to Jake being the property manager, and now you guys are forming community developers and really getting into some ground up construction. What does that transition look like for you guys? And it's great because you see this, and people talk a lot about this in kind of like this stacking mechanism with real estate. It's like, oh, you kind of go into a single family and then you kind of go into a multifamily and you start getting into bigger units. And what you guys are seeing is you were kind of in rentals to flips to new construction, and there's that development also there. What has kind of been that development that looks like, what does it feel like on your guys' end? What has been some challenges, and then what has been kind of more of like that aha moment that you feel like if you found one?
Yeah, so I would say like right now, I would say that one of the challenges is definitely figuring out, okay, kind of we're going to set our goals. How do we get there is kind of the first step. So for us, it's kind of figuring out if new construction is our goal, how exactly do we manage that financially? That's definitely one of the biggest challenges because with new construction, it's not really like fast money. I mean, you're, buying a lot, then you're doing plans for a month or two, and then you're building it, then you're selling it. So we can't really do a new construction from acquisition to resale in like 3 or 4 months. It's just not possible. But that is possible with a flip. So our cash conversion cycle is definitely longer with the new construction than it is with flips. So figuring that out, and then figuring out, okay, how many flips and other active income sources do we have to have in order to get the ball rolling with the new construction and kind of make that happen.
Yeah,
that's
like
so true.
The progression of like flipping the new construction, like we're both of the mentality, like flipping is great. And, you can blow through a project in 2-3 months and make 40, 30, 40, 50 grand if it goes well. But sometimes it can be like a project we did in Delran, right? Janeway.
Yeah.
You put all this time and effort and, the budget sort of gets blown out of proportion and you do this entire like 5-6 month project, this headache, and you walk away and you make nothing. In that project, we didn't lose anything, but we didn't make anything. But the point being is like flips have just so much variability. And for our, for the construction business we run, we have 2 employees that are pretty much our foremen, and they sit on a project. And so for them, we work with them for several years. We trust them. And so when things come up, we trust that they can work through it and fix it. But then if we're doing other flips at the same time, we have to sub different things out to some of the different subs that we use. And it can be challenging to trust that they're going to get it done. So, kind of how this ties into new construction is new construction. You do everything right from the beginning. So in that we sub everything out, but we've, gotten to the point now where we have subs that do good work. And so you build this house, hopefully right from the beginning. Yes, sure, little mistakes are made, but it's very different. It's a lot more predictable than a flip because once you get through the planning and you get your permits and you start building, it's pretty much like rinse, wash, repeat. Where a flip, it's like everyone's different. Every budget's different. There's houses where, if your budget's only $60,000, you have to pick and choose what you can do in a house. I mean, if we could gut every single house, rewire it, replumb it, we would, but we have to make money. It's a business. So it's challenging to sort of figure out where to draw the line. And so that's sort of like why we've focused a little bit more on new construction, is because if you can underwrite the deal and make the numbers work, then the fun, like running the actual construction and the development itself is just so much, to me, even though there's so much more involved than a flip, it's just so much easier to manage. It's like, yes, there's variables in every new construction, but for the most part, it's A to Z, where a flip, it could be, ABC, and oh crap, now there's termite damage. Powder post beetles, and now we got to frame the entire floor, and everything just gets thrown out the window. So that's sort of how the progression of getting into new construction.
That's a really good point. It sounds like kind of once you pass the initial hurdles, and I want to talk about zoning, I want to talk about like permits and all that stuff too, but the simplicity is there because it's just a blank canvas and you're drawing it, right? One thing that I personally didn't think of that, Rob, you did bring up is how do you, because you're in this full time, how do you keep that cash flow coming in? Because if you're start to finish on a new construction deal, and let's just call it a year, it's hard to wait a year to get paid, right? Like, so you have to keep the other projects that are coming, those flips and all that other stuff. And I assume that if you're doing new construction, and I want to just talk about your two foremen that you have, are they building the house like totally, or are you getting other people in there that are really building that property?
Yeah, so our employees are mostly focused on our flips. They could probably build a house, but it would take substantially way too long for us. So
yes.
On the new construction side, we sub everything out. So we'll have a framing crew that come in with like 8 guys, and they can have an entire like 2,400 square foot house framed in 2 weeks. If we had our 2 guys on it, they probably could get it done, but you'd probably be talking several months. So they're focused primarily on our flips.
Right. And so another reason that we arrange things that way is that when you're dealing with subcontractors, or at least with our employees, we find that our employees, because they've been working for us for a while, they're much better at problem solving, like older like issues. So they can kind of go into like an older house and say, okay, this is wrong here. Maybe we should do this. Maybe we shouldn't do that. Or another important thing is they can go into a house and say, hey, Jake and Rob, just so you know, like there's this issue here, like we should fix it. So they have a little bit more of a vested interest in our future. They're not just coming there to do the job and leave, essentially. So they're going to be there from this project start to the project end. So that's why we have our employees working on the flips instead of new construction. Whereas, new construction is just kind of like, you frame the house, you're done. And then there's not really like a problem to solve other than like your job.
Of getting the house done.
Yeah. I think where we're at right now, like as much as there's pros and cons to flipping new construction, but like we both recognize that we need to do flips to bring an active income, because we can do a project in 3-4 months where, like you said, Frankie, a new construction can easily take a year. So we're like at this stage of where we're at, like right now our goals are to try and do 10 flips this year and 10, have either 10 new construction projects finished or started or kind of in process. But like the goal in the next few years is to continue to add more new construction projects in the pipeline and phase out the flip so that, hey, we have 20 new construction projects going right now. We're going to have 5 closing out this quarter and 5 closing out next quarter. But for where we're at right now, like we have 4 that are in the pipeline, Deptford, Mount Laurel, Cherry Hill, and Pine Hill, but they're all in planning stages right now. So they're all not going to be done until, I would say, best case, the end of this year, early next year. And so for the time being, we need to do flips to bring an active income to cover, business costs. So maybe in the next year or two, if we continue to get more and more new construction lots under contract and through different phases, we can get to a point where like, oh yeah, we got 6 projects that are just about finishing. We got 5 projects that are just starting, construction, and we got 5 projects that we just closed on, and we're doing permitting and zoning, and so like we have this nice healthy pipeline that we don't really need to worry about doing flips as much. But for right now, where we're at, the flips bring in the active income.
Yeah, I think another really important part for us that we've kind of gotten down recently is for new construction, not just the cash conversion cycle is longer, but the money out of pocket is larger too, for compared to our flips, because right now we have a few different lenders that we have 100% financing with on our flips, meaning that for all the construction and the purchase price, we're just coming out of pocket for closing costs and interest and stuff like that, and not actually putting a substantial amount of money into those deals. Whereas lenders for new construction, that type of arrangement is just too risky for them. So it's more uncommon, and we have to put more money into those deals. So
let's that segues to a great point. I want to talk about underwriting for a new construction deal.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like on the lending side? But then what does it look like as well, when you guys actually like analyze a deal and put together deal math?
Yeah, so I would say on the lending side, the lenders want to know. I mean, first question is, how many new construction projects have you done? In my case, when I did my first new construction, I didn't have any, but I was still able to get the loan. So I kind of sent photos over of other flips I've done and kind of said, hey, I've basically done new construction, just not the foundation part. So kind of made that case to the bank, showed them the rentals that I had and other just like, positive. So in that case, that was a local bank that I decided to go with. And that probably worked out well because they have a little bit more of like a personal like decision. It's not just like, do you check this box or do you not check this box? So on the lending side, they look at your experience. And then as far as the deal is concerned, I mean, ideally they want you to have, so, if your project cost, your land is going to be $100,000, they want your, if your after repair value is going to be $100,000, they want your land plus your build cost to be $70,000 or sometimes $65,000. So to make it really simple, that's pretty much like what they're looking for. And
so
then
just to recap that, if the after repair value is 100, they want to see that if you bought the lot for $20,000, that it's going to cost you $50,000 to build the house. You're in for 70%, right? Obviously, which isn't actual numbers on building a house, but just for round number purposes, yes.
Yeah, pretty much. That's generally what they look for. I mean, certain banks are higher and lower, and then you have certain banks that will finance a higher percentage or lower percentage of your costs. So some of our banks will finance 90% of our costs, others 80%. But that 70% number is like of the total after repair value is super important. That's what I look at most things on. So they look at that. Some banks get kind of intense with like zoning research and like one bank that we work with recently requires us to get an architect letter stating that like the lot is buildable. That's kind of a new thing. We don't usually have that.
Okay.
Other banks are less looking at the land and more looking at like your experience.
Got it.
There's kind of like different layers of deal math. Like there's the deal math you have to do for the bank, which like the architect letter, like we know we've done the research. We know this lot's buildable. You have to prove to them that it's buildable, and you have to have an architect or an engineer sign off. There's the construction budget, which you have to get to the bank. But like for us, like before we even bring the deal to the bank, we're looking at a lot and we're determining in our heads, does it even make sense to take this to the next step of putting under contract and getting it financed. So like a general rule of thumb, like in terms of deal math, when it comes to like the construction side is we factor about $160 to $170 per square foot for construction costs. So you look at your land purchase, you say, hey, I think, neighborhood wise, lot size, we should build a 2,400 square foot house. So that's going to cost $350,000 plus, $100,000 land purchase. So we're all in at $450, and houses in this neighborhood are selling for $650. So it's like you kind of, we've gotten really good at doing like rough deal math, and that 160 to 170 per square foot has been across the 4 new constructions we've done to date has been relatively accurate. And that's going to change depending, like some lots will require like stormwater management. Some lots will have like weird complexities that, other lots won't. So it's not like a end all be all figure, but for us, it gives us like a really quick way. We're not, every project we look at, we're not like, okay, framing is $18,732.62. It's like, we're just, we're looking at a ton of lots. And so we have sort of like a quick calculator. Rob's built out a calculator that kind of, we can really quickly say, okay, this looks good. Let's dive deeper into it. Is there wetlands? Is there pine lands? Is there any other weird things we're not seeing on this lot that would just completely blow this budget out of proportion? And if not, then it's like, okay, let's get this under contract and move to the next step.
Right. So kind of like more recently, since we've had the calculator, I mean, usually like Jake and I kind of talk about it. We go through it. We kind of bounce ideas back and forth. And kind of a lot of times the next step is the calculator. So our calculator shows us we have different levels of rehab and new construction, which we can estimate. It includes numbers from like our lenders, closing costs, stuff like that. So we pretty much just plug our numbers into the calculator, our own calculator that we built, and then if it makes sense, and there's nothing else, then we definitely take the next step.
That's awesome. So When you talk about that 160 to 170 square feet for that renovation, when you did your first new construction, what did you project, and was it kind of on par with what you projected?
Yeah, I'll let you answer that
Yeah,
one.
so it was actually like, I think it was relatively close. I don't have the comparison like in front of me right now. That first new construction project had its own set of hurdles and difficulties, but the actual construction part was not really one of them. I might have been off. I think if I remember correctly, I might have been off by like around 10%, but I
Okay.
was like relatively close because for that particular project, I had all my quotes lined up beforehand and was really, really paying attention to the details because it was the first time I was doing one. So
Yeah.
I think for somebody that's doing their first, like having a general contractor provide a quote, that'd be a good way to start. Even if you think you're going to do it yourself and manage it yourself, it's still, if you don't know like how to estimate things, like for you had done a ton of flips, so you knew what things cost. But for someone that's maybe only done a couple like light cosmetic, paint and carpet flips, like it's new constructions, there's a whole nother layer of things that you're dealing with and estimating.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the way that we do it obviously is to manage it ourselves. So we manage all of our subcontractors, but that's not the only way. And for somebody that has a deal that's relatively has a big margin, it may make sense to get a general contractor, especially if the property's not close to where they live or other challenges with it.
Yeah, because we, to build a house, unless you're building a house for yourself, there's a little bit of a flexibility with that. You don't need to be a general contractor. You don't need to
at least New Jersey.
At least New Jersey. You don't need to be a new home builder. But for us building houses, under an LLC with the intention to sell, we have to have a general contractor's license. We have to have a new home builder's license. So we couldn't just do that without. We could, but it'd be illegal. So we have to have all these licenses. We have to have workers' comp policies. So it is a bit of a hurdle to entry, a barrier to entry for somebody that doesn't have that. So if that's not really your cup of tea of figuring out how to do all that stuff, then that doesn't mean you still can't underwrite deals, work on the planning, work with your engineer, your surveyor, your architect, and then finding somebody, like us or like a general contractor that does it and say, okay, here's the land, here's what I want to build. I got the plans. Can you provide an estimate? And here's the finishes I'm looking for, and let me know what it's going to cost. And for us doing it ourselves, we save the general contractor's fee. So, if it costs us $350,000 to build a home, it costs us $350,000 to build a home. For somebody that's a GC, they're going to mark that up, 25%. And so, but if you can still make that work in your numbers, it doesn't really matter. And if it gets you through your first experience of building a house, and then you say, wow, I really, love this whole process. Maybe I want to go get my license and do all this. Or maybe I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. So it just depends, but that's kind of how we sort of manage it.
Yeah, I it's funny, as like an interviewer in a case like this, it's actually a lot harder for me because everything that you guys are saying, I am also soaking in, and I'm also trying to think of follow-up questions for you guys too. But like, I think just being around you guys, and we talked about some lots and stuff like that. Like, there's a lot of things that you guys look at. You look at like frontage of the lot. You look at what the zoning is. You look at, is it wetlands? Are there utilities tied to it? And it's all these things that I think if no one's ever even gone down the rabbit hole of new construction, but they want to do it, they're just not going to think about these things. What would be kind of some of your advice for someone who like wants to get into new construction, doesn't have much experience? And I think I know that obviously we're going to say like, go find a mentor, but if there's anything to add to that or to expand to, what would your advice to be to someone new?
I would say for like underwriting the land, like we go through and underwrite stuff pretty quickly because it's faster for us to do it than ask somebody else. But if you're serious about trying to build a new construction house, I would probably do two things if you find a lot. The first would be email the zoning officer in the town and then ask, hey, is this buildable? And then a lot of times they'll respond. They may not respond the same day or the same week, but they probably will respond at some point. That's one. And then the second is if you have a good civil engineer that you can get on your team and you say, hey, I'm looking to build a house. And then you can kind of email that civil engineer occasionally and say, hey, I'm looking at this lot. Like, what are your thoughts on it? That can definitely help out substantially. And if you're kind of new to new construction and you don't do either of those things, I would say it's like extremely risky to buy something. But I think doing both of those things would at least mitigate some of the risk, because the engineer is going to figure out if there are wetlands or any other sort of weird environmental high level things going on. And then the zoning person will also kind of help kind of guide you along as well with that.
If I were to add to that, I'd say, I mean, YouTube and social media, like the more I've gotten into this, and the algorithms are so accurate that I follow so many people now that are developers. This one that comes to mind, Arthur, the developer, he's a younger guy. He's probably, around our age, and he's done like, I think hundreds of new construction houses, and he like breaks it down all the time. He has courses. Like there's so much like content out there. And like even in an Instagram reel that might be, a minute or 90 seconds, like each video you get a little like nugget. Like I'm thinking off the top of my head, he always does videos like the first 3 things you got to look at in a lot. And it's like survey, geotech, and zoning. And it's just like, you just pick up, the more you like consume, the more you'll pick up. And, there's nothing will ever top just doing it yourself and going through it yourself. But there's, between, the town zoning officer, having an engineer, and just like YouTube and Instagram, there's so much like content out there to figure it out. So, you don't necessarily need to have a mentor. It helps. It is certainly like jumpstart it, but just like go out and try and find as much as you can. It's not rocket science by any means. That was like one of the sort of eye openers for me when I first met Rob and he's doing this, and I'm just like, dude, this is crazy. Like I thought you were a builder and you really just kind of figured it out and learned, and then going through it with Rob's help and mentorship. And now I'm completing my second project, and I'm like, it really isn't rocket science. There is a lot to it. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's not rocket science. We don't need to know everything. We have a good engineer. We have a good architect. We have good subcontractors, and, it sort of just figures itself out. And on every project, the house that we're finishing in Cherry Hill is the second time we built this house, and we had a lot of lessons learned in the first one, and we're like, okay, let's fix all these things on the second house, and we fixed a lot of them, and now it's like, crap, there's so many other things we would have done different, so we're building this house again, and now it's like we're just constantly trying to like get better and get better. So we're not geniuses over here, we're not experts.
Sure. And that's definitely true. We learn something new on every house, but we also learn, a lot of times you learn new things just by continuing to underwrite deals. And as we continue to underwrite more and more, and we kind of look at more and more lots, we see things come up that we didn't even know about before. For instance, we were planning to build 5 houses in one location a couple weeks ago. And typically we will do like some environmental underwriting with tools that we have available online in New Jersey, which will show us where wetlands are, right? So these tools are published by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. So you think that the tools would be accurate, right? So we had used the tools to analyze this land that we plan to build 5 houses on. And then we had talked to our engineer about it. And he said, hey, you know what? I actually want to go out and take a look at this. I just have like a little suspicion, like maybe something's not marked off properly here. So he ends up going out to the site, walking the site physically, and finding out that entire stretch of land is all wetlands and it's not buildable whatsoever. And then if we were to build a house there, it would essentially just like sink into the soil, and then we would have like a lot of liability given that there are wetlands there, even though the state didn't mark it off properly. So weird things like that still come up. So that's why definitely having a good team of experts on your side if you decide to get started is a good idea.
Yeah, for sure.
100%. Now that engineer that goes out there, is that like you just made a call and you were asking about it and he ended up going out, or this is kind of like in the process? Did you have this deal under contract or anything like that, or this was all kind of just preliminary?
Yeah, so it was actually like multiple sellers. So one of the parcels we had under contract, we actually did have under contract. So we were discussing that with him and the potential plans. We had talked to our attorney about it, and we kind of had like, a bunch of like expert meetings. And then, at that point, then he said, I kind of want to go take a look at it. And he did.
And it kind of like goes to working with good professionals. Bill Gilmore at a site Civil Engineering, he's someone that we use quite often, and he's, and every professional is different, but he's somebody that will typically answer his phone. And he always tells me it's business development. When I call him, I'm like, hey, Cliff, I know it's a stupid question, but can you explain how wetlands work? And it's like, he's not like, all right, hold on, let me start my timer. All right, I'm going to send you a bill, like, where an attorney might do that. He's very just helpful, like giving information out. I mean, there's so much stuff that he's done for us that he hasn't billed us for, but he sees it as business development. Hey, I'm going to continue helping you guys. I see what you guys are doing. And eventually, you're going to be bringing me more, site plan work or whatever, more engineering work, and it's going to work out. So like that ties into like having like really good professionals, because then there's like the opposite of him where it's like you can't get a hold of him. Every time you call him and you do get a hold of him, they make you feel like you're bothering them. And it's like not a good feeling as somebody that's trying to learn. So it's just like, don't get discouraged by, somebody that's older or somebody that just does not want to help. They just see us as young guys. They're like, you're wasting my time. Like find the person that doesn't think that way and wants to help you, wants to teach you, because they are out there.
100%. Just because I want to be cognizant of time, but I definitely want to have you guys again in the future for explaining like a start to finish new construction deal, maybe that one in Cherry Hill or some other one that you're working on for sure. But, a couple of weeks ago, it might have been actually a couple of months ago at this point, Rob, I remember we pulled up to a house, I think it was in Williamstown, and you looked exhausted. And I asked why you looked so tired. And you were like, I was up all night building this AI bot to like do some absolutely insane things for me. And you guys, it seems like you guys are incorporating AI a lot into your business. And I'd like, just for me personally, like AI freaks me out a little bit. And I think I just don't know a lot about it. And I think of the worst things that could come from it. But like, I'm sure like people felt that way about computers when they came into the world and stuff like that. Right. So tell me about what you're using it for positively and how it's, impacting your business.
So, kind of a weird story goes along with this too. So, we, and I can probably say this now, because the person's not going to be with us too much longer, but we hired somebody recently, overseas and, wasn't going well and getting a lot of communication back and forth. And I kind of realized that the entire time that we're talking to this person, they're just using like ChatGPT to talk to us. I'm like,
oh my gosh.
And how do you know that they're doing?
It's just after you see enough of like the output from it, like you just recognize there's a certain style of like language that it makes. And so then we had like a, screen tracking software because they're overseas and, went on their like time tracking software and saw that they're spending, hours a day like on ChatGPT. So I said,
oh my gosh.
So I said to myself at that point, okay, why are we paying somebody to like use ChatGPT when maybe there's a way that we could just use AI to like automate some of the processes in our business? And that was just kind of like the spark that started me looking into stuff. So then I started looking into, okay, ChatGPT and these other large language models are like have a website, you can type stuff in. Okay, that's great. Is there a way to actually integrate it into the business where when, let's say, X happens, then like something else happens and then ChatGPT like is part of that process to like analyze maybe data or do something else like in the business, almost like an if-then routine or some sort of routine. So It was just like a random idea I had and I was curious. I didn't talk to anybody about it. So I started like researching it, finding out that is a really big thing going on right now that not a lot of people that I know personally are doing, but a lot of people in other parts of the country are. So it's really integrating AI into like different workflows and routines. So the way that we've used that recently and it's continuing to evolve. So initially I was doing a lot of that like back end kind of building and programming myself, which is why I was so tired that day. Ended up realizing I'm not the best person for that. So we hired a developer online recently and he's helping us out a lot with it. So a couple of different ways we're using it is one, we're feeding all of our construction receipts through like automatically through OpenAI to analyze our receipts and figure out exactly line by line what every category, every item is for every project. So we know exactly how much we're going to be spending on adhesives, how much we spent on lumber, doorknobs, like all these different categories that we have. Whereas before we have all these Home Depot receipts and, we're spending all this money and we say, okay, well, we can kind of figure it out, but like Home Depot doesn't give us like a category for every receipt or every item that we can really easily use. So we're going to do it that way. So we have all that information kind of coming through and analyzing our receipts. That's one thing. And so with that particular system, we actually have something built out where our contractors have a phone number that they use to send us receipts. So contractor goes to Home Depot, buys something, takes a picture of a receipt, and then it goes to our phone number. At that point, we actually have an AI system analyzing the receipt and then responding to them if they don't provide us certain information that we need, like the job name or something like that. So that's kind of like the next part of that we're working on. But the more interesting thing to me is we've been building a lot of things recently to help analyze and underwrite deals. So one thing that we're working on right now is we are taking thousands and thousands of records from the MLS, figuring out like exactly what properties are selling for and different square footage ranges and different zip codes. Because as like the square footage of a property changes, so does like its price per square foot. So like on the lower end, like a 900 square foot house may sell for a higher price per square foot because it's small, and then a bigger house may sell for a lower price. So trying to look at all that data and then figure out, for instance, okay, in this zip code, all houses above 1,700 square feet are selling for like, let's say $100 a square foot. So if we're building new construction there, we should definitely not build over 1,700 square feet. So trying to use it to figure out what size houses we should build, and then also to analyze MLS data to figure out, okay, here's a list of several thousand properties. We actually have one routine where it's organizing all the MLS properties that are currently on the market and then assigning a heat score to each one based on our criteria. So the higher our heat score, the more likely it's a property that would make sense for us to buy and flip. So
I think the thing with AI is, and you've really opened my eyes to this, is like pretty much any like menial task you spend time doing, you would just be amazed on how it can just do it for you. So like one that on every property exists, it's so simple, is every property you purchase, you do a title search. It's a super important part. And you get this giant title report, sometimes like 100 pages. And it's like all this different stuff about the lot, if there's easements. And we probably have never read one of the, we don't read those, but now you can literally
you don't read those? That's surprising.
It's good bathroom reading. No, you can take this PDF and you put it into an AI and you say, hey, please let me know if there's anything going on with this title, and it'll just spit out and summarize and say, hey, there's an easement in the back and there's this and that. And like another example for like new construction is we're getting quotes right now for lumber. And so for a new construction project, there's a ton of lumber that's needed. So these quotes are quite long. And so we have 5 companies that quoted it, and they each quoted differently, and they each, show different quantities. So I'm like looking, I was like, oh, how much are they charging for 2x4s? And Rob comes in, he's like, dude, just input it into the AI and ask it to do it for you. I'm like, no way. And I uploaded all 5 PDFs of the estimates and just said, hey, compare unit pricing for all dimensional lumber. And then in like 30 seconds, it spit out a graph, and it's like Home Depot is $2.36 for 2x4. Carter Lumber is $3. And I just sent a table over to our lumber representative and say, look, here's where Home Depot is cheaper, and they would save us $1,200. Like, can you guys match the price? And like within like a couple minutes, and assuming he comes back and says yes, we just saved $1,200 because of an AI. So like it's really, it's sort of like a muscle that you need to just sort of like stop beating your head against the wall and just think, hold on, let me just take a step back. Can this be automated? Can this be done? And it's just surprising. Like, you don't need to like, years ago before AI, you had to program everything and you had to tell program exactly what you wanted to do. And with an AI, like, you give it very little information and it just knows. And it's like, it, like you said, Frank, it is kind of scary. And I think we're at like the early stage of this. Like, this is in 5 to 10 years. I can't even imagine where it's going to go, but like leverage it and get ahead of other businesses that aren't using it.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
In our kind of like one of our biggest goals right now is we're building like a whole company backend, and on that backend, to kind of like tie in one thing I was mentioning before, every day when we log into our company backend, in a couple of weeks from now, we should have a list of like every property in our area that's on the market organized by like this heat score. So that's like the end goal and like vision. And then next to that property, we're going to have a button that says submit offer, and then click that button, and then everything's boom, 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 automatically emailed to the agent. And then that's how it will work.
That is absolutely insane. That's insane.
Kind of getting in the weeds sometimes, but that's the end goal of like what we're working on.
We could spend hours talking about this.
That's the actual end goal. So
I'm getting from this that we need to pretty much like rehab like 3 additional episodes that come after this with you guys, just to break down all these different topics. But I mean, that's amazing. I appreciate having you guys on. Where can people find you?
Instagram. We're trying to get a little bit more big on that. So community developers. We have a Facebook page too, but primarily on Instagram. We're actually looking to bring on a social media person to kind of help do some content and editing. It's not something Rob and I are very good at. So community developers.
Hey, you've been on the come up though, bro. You've been on the come up.
I'm trying to be like you when I grow up, Frankie,
Well, all right. So that's good to know. If anybody is looking to partner up with Jake and Rob and be a part of the community developers team, they're looking for a social media person. That's awesome. And just being around these guys and hearing the way they talk about real estate, I could tell you firsthand, like, I've learned so much from both of you. And still to this day, I mean, Rob, I was texting you 2 days ago about a tenant problem that I was having and figuring out how to navigate it. So, having that network is really so important. And being in a room with these two guys is absolutely amazing. So I always ask my people that I have on, is there anything that you want to leave the listeners with? Any last final thoughts?
Don't be intimidated by problems as long as you put enough time and research and talk to people. I mean, anything in construction can be figured out.
I
real estate.
I would say that, excuse me. I would say that you don't need to know everything to get started. Do not get stuck in the weeds. Just everybody starts from somewhere. Even somebody that does 100, 200 units a year. They started probably with a single family home. So start somewhere and just trust the process, and you'd be surprised.
100%, man. Well, Jake and Rob, I appreciate having you guys on. Thank you so much for coming. Absolutely. Everybody appreciate you guys listening. Pray the rosary, buy real estate, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace out.